that's my life's work. If you look inside my brain, it's filled with software and, you know, the magic of software and a belief in software. And, you know, that's not going to change.
I grew up fairly middle class, lower middle class, and I never really cared much about money. And I sort of look at us as two of the luckiest guys on the planet because we found what we loved to do, and we were at the right place at the right time. It's hard to be happier than that. I think the world's a better place because Bill realized that his goal isn't to be the richest guy in the cemetery.
The way he does things, it's just different. And, you know, I think it's magical.
Essa conversa entre Bill Gates e Steve Jobs acontece no segundo semestre de 2007. O Jobs estava de volta à Apple, fazia 10 anos mais ou menos, e o Gates estava a 1 ano de se aposentar definitivamente e ir para a filantropia. Os dois já eram empresários de notado sucesso, a Apple ainda não era maior que a Microsoft. A relação deles tinha sido sempre uma relação meio áspera, um às vezes precisava do outro, isso aconteceu em vários momentos. Todo mundo queria ver esse encontro. Bill Gates é o sujeito que inventou a indústria do software. E de certa forma, Steve Jobs, junto com o sócio dele, Steve Wozniak, são os dois caras que inventaram a indústria do computador pessoal. O computador pessoal só faz sentido se você tem programas, e programas, evidentemente, só fazem sentido se pessoas estão comprando computadores. E de repente você tem esses dois sujeitos, é claro que outras pessoas contribuíram, mas de repente você tem esses dois sujeitos que representam tanto e que nesse momento, em 2007, já estavam no pico das suas carreiras, ainda extremamente produtivos. De repente vocês têm os dois se encontrando com tanta história para contar, com tantas brigas nos seus passados. Como é que eles vão reagir? Estava todo mundo muito ansioso para ver a entrevista. E eu acho que a maior surpresa para todos os observadores é que eles se trataram bem, eles estavam nostálgicos, eles estavam gostando de ter aquela conversa, quase que uma conversa informal mesmo, entre duas pessoas que se conhecem há muito e estão falando sobre o passado.
Let's get started. I wanted to ask, there's been a lot of like mano a mano catfight kind of thing in a lot of the blogs and the press and stuff like that. And we wanted to, the first question I was interested in asking is what you think each has contributed to the computer and technology industry, starting with you, Steve, for Bill, and vice versa.
Well, you know, Bill built the first software company in the industry. And I think he built the first software company before anybody really in our industry knew what a software company was, except for these guys. And that was huge. That was really huge. And the business model that they ended up pursuing turned out to be the one that worked really well, you know, for the industry. Mm-hmm. So I think, but the biggest thing was Bill was really focused on software before almost anybody else had a clue that it was really the software. That's what I see. I mean, a lot of other things you could say, but that's the high order bit. And I think building a company is really hard. And it requires your greatest persuasive abilities to hire the best people you can and keep them at your company and keep them working, you know, doing the best work of their lives, hopefully. And Bill's been able to stay with it for all these years. So,
Bill, how about the contribution of Steve and Apple?
Well, first I want to clarify, I'm not fake Steve Jobs. You know, what Steve's done is quite phenomenal. You know, if you look back to 1977, that Apple II computer, the idea that it would be a mass market machine, you know, the bet that was made there by Apple uniquely, there were other people with products, but the idea that this could be an incredible, empowering phenomena, Apple pursued that dream. You know, then one of the most fun things we did was the Macintosh, and that was so risky. You know, people may not remember that Apple really bet the company. Lisa hadn't done that well, and you know, some people were saying, okay, that general approach wasn't good. But the team that Steve built, even within the company, to pursue that even some days it felt a little ahead of its time. Steve gave a speech once, which is one of my favorites, where he talked about, in a certain sense, we build the products that we want to use ourselves. And so he's really pursued that with incredible taste and elegance that has had a huge impact on the industry. And his ability to always come around and figure out where that next bet should be has been phenomenal. Apple literally was failing when Steve went back and reinfused the innovation and risk-taking that have been phenomenal. So the industry's benefited immensely from his work. We've both been lucky to be part of it, but I'd say he's contributed as much as anyone.
Well, we've also both been incredibly lucky to have had great partners that we started the companies with, and we've attracted great people. I mean, so everything that's been done at Microsoft and at Apple has been done by just remarkable people, none of which are sitting up here, today.
I know that you started Microsoft prior to 1977. I think Apple started the year before in 76. Microsoft in
74 was when we started writing the
75.
BASIC. And then, then we did shipped the BASIC in 75.
Okay. Most people, some people here, but I don't think most people know that there was actually some Microsoft software in that Apple II computer. Do you want to talk about what happened there, how that occurred?
Yeah, there'd been the Altair and a few other companies, actually about 24 that had done various machines, but the 77 group included the PET, TRS-80,
Commodore.
and Commodore PET, TRS-80, and the Apple II. The original Apple II BASIC, the integer BASIC, we had nothing to do with, but then there was a floating point one where, and I mostly worked with Woz on that.
Let me tell this story. So Woz, my partner, we started out with this guy named Steve Wozniak, brilliant guy. He writes this BASIC that is like the best BASIC on the planet. It does stuff that no other BASIC's ever done. You don't have to run it to find your error messages. It finds them when you type it in and stuff. It's perfect in every way, except for one thing, which is it's just fixed point, right? It's not floating point. And so we're getting a lot of input that people want this BASIC to be floating point. And like we're begging Woz, please make this floating point.
Who's we? How many people are in Apple?
Well, me. Yeah. We're begging Woz to make this floating point. And he just never does it, and he wrote it by hand on paper. I mean, he didn't have an assembler or anything to write it with. It was all just written on paper, and he'd type it in. He just never got around to making a floating point. Well, this is one of the mysteries of life. I don't know, but he never did.
Se você perguntasse a alguém na indústria da computação no início dos anos 70, se alguém teria um computador em casa, iam, na maioria dos casos, receber você como alguém falando de ficção científica. Então tem esse grupo no norte da Califórnia, no Vale do Silício, que começa a trocar receitas de como montar um computador. E o Woz e o Jobs, que fundam a Apple, estão entre essas primeiras pessoas. E eles são os primeiros, a Apple é a primeira a fazer um computador que não era apenas um projeto de como você comprar peças e montar um computador em casa. O Apple II, que é de 77, 78, é um computador que vem numa caixa de plástico, tem monitor, tem teclado, e ele roda alguma coisa. De repente, um computador é um produto de consumo. Ao mesmo tempo, em Seattle, no estado de Washington, um pouquinho só ao norte, o Bill Gates, junto com Paul Allen, seu sócio na fundação da Microsoft, começa a desenvolver programas que rodam nesses vários computadores que estão nascendo na Califórnia. E os primeiros programas são, na verdade, linguagens de programação. O BASIC, básico mesmo em português, é essa linguagem mais simples. Na verdade, esses primeiros computadores pessoais não passam mais do que calculadoras programáveis. Você tinha que fazer o programa. E a Microsoft começa a estourar dessa forma. Se alguém pode te vender um computador, alguém também pode vender para você um software que te permite fazer o que você quiser com o computador. Ou ao menos o que você quer nos limites de finais dos anos 70.
Microsoft had this very popular, really good floating point BASIC that we ended up going to them and saying, help.
And how much was I think you were telling us earlier?
That was $31,000.
That Apple paid you for that.
The floating point BASIC. And I flew out to Apple. I spent 2 days there getting the cassette. The cassette tapes were the main ways that people stored things at the time.
Right.
And, that was fun. I think the most fun is later when we worked together.
Well,
on the
what was the
Macintosh.
most fun? Tell the story about the most fun that was later.
Well, Steve can probably start it better. The team that was assembled there to do the Macintosh was a very committed team. And there was an equivalent team on our side that just got totally focused on this activity. Jeff Harbers, a lot of incredible people. And we really had bet our future because on the Macintosh being successful, and then hopefully graphics interface in general being successful. But first and foremost, the thing that would popularize that being the Macintosh. And so we were working together, the schedules were uncertain, the quality was uncertain, the price. When Steve first came up, it was going to be a lot cheaper computer than it ended up being, but that was fine.
So you worked in both places, in both?
Well, we were in Seattle, and we fly down there.
But Microsoft, if I remember correctly, from what I read, wasn't Microsoft one of the few companies that were allowed to even have a prototype of the Mac at the time?
Well, what's interesting, what's hard to remember now is that Microsoft wasn't in the applications business then. They took a big bet on the Mac because this is how they got into the apps business. I mean, Lotus dominated the apps business on the PC back then.
Right. We had done just Multiplan, which was a hit on the Apple II. And then Mitch did an incredible job betting on the IBM PC. And 123 came in and, ruled that part of the business. So the question was, what was the next paradigm shift that would allow for an entry? WordPerfect, we had Word, but WordPerfect was by far the strongest in word processing, DBase, and database.
Well, you said you had decided that it was destructive to have this competition with Microsoft. Now, obviously, Apple was in a lot of trouble, and I presume that there was some tactical or strategic reason for that, as well as just wanting to be a nice guy, right? I mean,
Apple was in very serious trouble, and what was really clear was that if the game was a zero-sum game where for Apple to win, Microsoft had to lose, then Apple was going to lose. But a lot of people's heads were still in that place.
Why was that from your perspective?
Well, a lot of people's heads were in that place at Apple, and even in the customer base, because Apple had invented a lot of this stuff, and Microsoft was being successful, and Apple wasn't, and there was jealousy and this and that. There was just a lot of reasons for it that don't matter. But the net result of it was there were too many people at Apple and in the Apple ecosystem playing the game of, for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. And it was clear that you didn't have to play that game, because Apple wasn't going to beat Microsoft. Apple didn't have to beat Microsoft. Apple had to remember who Apple was, because it had forgotten who Apple was. And so to me, it was pretty essential to break that paradigm. And it was also important that Microsoft was the biggest software developer outside of Apple developing for the Mac. And so it was just crazy what was happening at that time. And Apple was very weak. And so I called Bill up and we tried to patch things up.
Então, de repente, em 97, os interesses desses dois sujeitos que brigaram por tanto tempo confluem. Confluem por quê? Primeiro, Bill Gates precisa provar para o governo americano que ele não é um monopólio. Ou seja, que existe um concorrente no mercado. E existe. O Macintosh da Apple. Então, Bill Gates precisa que a Apple não quebre. Por outro lado, a Apple está quebrando. O CEO da Apple, o presidente da Apple, acaba de ser demitido, Jobs está no lugar dele e ele precisa dar algum tipo de sinal para o mercado de que a Apple consegue sobreviver. Como que a Apple consegue sobreviver? Se uma grande empresa, se o homem mais rico do mundo se compromete em escrever programas para a Apple e mais do que isso, investir. Então, o próprio Gates investe $100 mil na Apple. Em 97, eles fazem esse acordo, é um acordo que ninguém esperava, e esse acordo é anunciado, o investimento da Apple, o investimento da Microsoft, o compromisso da Microsoft em desenvolver programas para a Apple. De repente, os dois interesses confluem. É sobre isso que o Jobs está falando agora.
And since that time, we've had a team that's fairly dedicated to doing the Mac applications, and they've always been treated kind of in a unique way so that they can have a pretty special relationship with Apple. And that's worked out very well. In fact, every couple years or so, there's been something new that we've been able to do on the Mac. And
we have
it's a great business for us. And
it's actually, the relationship between the Mac development team at Microsoft and Apple is a great relationship. It's one of our best developer relationships.
How do you look at Microsoft from an Apple perspective? I mean, you compete in computers and... If
you look at the reason that the iPod exists and that Apple's in that marketplace, it's because these really great Japanese consumer electronics companies who kind of owned the portable music market for a long, invented it and owned it, couldn't do the appropriate software. Couldn't conceive of and implement the appropriate software. Because an iPod's really just software. It's software in the iPod itself, it's software on the PC or the Mac, and it's software in the cloud for the store. And it's in a beautiful box, but it's software. If you look at what a Mac is, it's OS 10, right? It's in a beautiful box, but it's OS 10. And so the big secret about Apple, of course, not so big secret maybe, is that Apple views itself as a software company. And there aren't very many software companies left, and Microsoft is a software company. And so, you know, we look at what they do, and we think some of it's really great, and we think some of it's, a little bit of it's competitive, and most of it's not. Alan Kay had a great quote back in the 70s, I think. He said, people that love software want to do their own hardware. You know?
Well, Bill loves software.
No, I can resist that. The question is, are there markets where the innovation and variety you get is a net positive? The negative is that in the early stage, you really want to do the two together. So you want to do prototyping and things like that, you know, really is one thing. And then to take the phone market, we think we're on 140 different kinds of hardware. We think it's beneficial to us that even if we did a few ourselves, it wouldn't give us what we have through those partnerships. Likewise, if you take the robotics market, very undeveloped. We have over 140 all tiny volume robots using Microsoft software. And the creativity, building toys, security things, medical things. We love the innovation and the ecosystem that's going to grow up, who knows when, but we're patient, around that, and we'll have a great asset with this robotic software platform. So there are things like PC, phone, and robot where the Microsoft choice is to go for the variety. Apple's great. They're, you know, for them, they do what works super well for them.
Do you ever regret, was there something you might have wanted to do differently? And maybe you feel like this happened after you left Apple. Something you might have done differently where you could have had a much bigger market share for the Mac?
Well, before I answer that, let me make a comment on Bill's answer there, which is, it's very interesting in the consumer market and the enterprise market. They're very different spaces. And in the consumer market, at least, I think one can make a pretty strong case that outside of Windows on PCs, it's hard to see other examples of the software and hardware being decoupled working super well yet. It might in the phone space over time. It might. But it's not clear. It's not clear. You can see a lot more examples of the hardware-software coupling working well. And so I think this is one of the reasons we all come to work every day, is because nobody knows the answer to some of these questions. And we'll find out over the coming years. Maybe both will work fine.
Is there some moment you feel like I should have done this or Apple should have done that and we could have had?
There's a lot of things that happened that I'm sure I could have done better when I was at Apple the first time. And a lot of things that happened after I left that I thought were wrong turns, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, and you kind of got to let go of that stuff. And we are where we are. So we tend to look forward. And one of the things I did when I got back to Apple 10 years ago was I gave the museum to Stanford and all the papers and all the old machines and kind of cleared out the cobwebs and said, let's stop looking backwards here. It's all about what happens tomorrow. And because you can't look back and say, well, gosh, I wish I hadn't gotten fired. I wish I was there. I wish this. I wish that. It doesn't matter. And so let's go invent tomorrow rather than worrying about what happened yesterday.
Ele, durante uns 2, 3 anos, ele se apresenta como CEO interino, ou, no modo de Steve Jobs, no ICO, ICO, e começa a pensar Como deve ser essa transformação? O primeiro passo é uma campanha publicitária, o Think Different, pense diferente. E dessa forma ele relembra aos consumidores o que a Apple representa, uma maneira diferente de você pensar em computadores pessoais. O segundo passo é um computador completamente diferente. Ele encontra um belo designer na equipe da Apple, Jonathan Ive, faz um computador branco com a traseira feita com plástico translúcido azul, é uma forma diferente. Ele chama esse computador de iMac. O passo seguinte é uma estratégia que vai revolucionar por completo a indústria da tecnologia, que é pensar no computador não mais como um aparelho que serve para você resolver coisas, mas pensar no computador como o centro, eles chamam em inglês de hub, né, de nó, de toda a sua vida. O que nós conhecemos hoje, ao longo dessa virada de século dos anos 2000, começa a se desenvolver.
How do you look at the landscape at this moment and what's happening, especially in the internet space?
I think it's super healthy right now. I think there's a lot of young people out there building some great companies who want to build companies, who aren't just interested in starting something and selling it to one of the big guys, but who want to build companies. And I think there's some really exciting companies getting built out there. Some next generation of stuff that you know, some of us play catch up with, and you know, some of us find ways to partner with and things like that. But there's a lot of activity out there now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say it's a healthy period.
Yeah.
The notion of what the new form factors look like, what natural interface can do, the ability to use the cloud, the internet, to do part of the task in a complementary way to the local experience. There's a lot of invention that the whole approach of startups, the existing companies who do research, we'll look back at this as one of the great periods of invention.
I think so too. There's a lot of things that are risky right now, which is always a good sign, you know, and you can see through them. You can see to the other side and go, yes, this could be huge, but there's a period of risk that, you know, nobody's ever done it before.
Do you have an example that would, for example?
I do, but I can't say.
Okay.
And so, but I can say, when you feel like that, that's a great thing.
Right.
That's what keeps you coming to work in the morning, and and it tells you there's something exciting around the next corner.
Em que momento nós estamos quando essa entrevista acontece? Segundo semestre de 2007. O iPhone acaba de ser lançado. E não foi um aparelho fácil de ser desenvolvido. Por quê? O Jobs queria que o iPhone usasse toda a sua superfície como tela. Para você usar toda a superfície como tela, para ter uma tela maior, para ver fotografia, vídeo, tudo mais, para navegar na internet, você não pode ter botões. Então ele precisava de uma tecnologia que permitisse você interagir com o telefone sem a existência de botões. Existia um grupo na Apple desenvolvendo isso. Era um grupo que estava desenvolvendo um tablet. Até esse período, Jobs negava veementemente, e continuou negando veementemente nos anos seguintes, que a Apple sequer estivesse pensando em fazer um tablet. Mas ele queria fazer um tablet. E um dos conceitos que ele tinha na cabeça para um tablet é, olha, você não pode usar uma caneta, você não pode usar nada, você tem que interagir com o tablet usando a sua mão. E ele não pode lembrar o sistema de um computador, ele tem que ser intuitivo no uso da mão. Essa tecnologia já estava desenvolvida. O iPad não estava nem próximo de ficar pronto, mas a tecnologia essencial estava desenvolvida. Essa tecnologia foi usada primeiro no iPhone. No entanto, nesse momento, a grande obsessão de Steve Jobs era quando que nós vamos ter o nosso tablet pronto para lançar no mercado.
Okay, but so the two of you have certainly you're involved every day with the internet. You have internet products. You have a whole slew of stuff on the internet. You have iTunes and .Mac and all of that. But on another level, you're the guys who represent the rich client, the personal computer, the, you know, big operating system and all that. And there is a certain school of thought, and I'm sure it's shared by some people in the room, that this is all migrating to the cloud and you'll need a fairly light piece of hardware that won't have to have all that investment, all the kind of stuff you guys have done throughout your careers. So as much as people might think of you as rivals, one way to think of you as the two guys.
They were both dinosaurs.
Huh?
They were both dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs or whatever. I can talk about that? No. Seriously, is
You're
there
betting on
in
a
5
system that is
years?
changing.
In 5 years, is the personal computer is still going to be the linchpin of all this stuff?
Well, you can say that it'll be predicted that it won't be. The network computer took us over about, 5 years ago, we disappeared. Remember the single function computer? There was somebody who said that these general purpose things are kind of a dumb idea. That took us over. The mainstream is always under attack. The thing that people don't realize is that you're going to have rich local functionality. I mean, at least our bet. As you get things like speech and vision, as you get more natural form factors, it's a question of using that local richness together with the richness that's elsewhere. And as you look at the device, say, that's connecting to the TV set or connecting in the car, there are lighter weight hardware internet connections. But when you come to the full screen, rich, edit the document, create things, I think we're nowhere near where we can be on making that stronger.
I'll give you a concrete example. I love Google Maps, use it on my computer, in a browser. But when we were doing the iPhone, we thought, wouldn't it be great to have maps on the iPhone? And so we called up Google, and they'd done a few client apps in Java on some phones, and they had an API that we worked with them a little on. And we ended up writing a client app for those APIs. They would provide the back-end service. And the app we were able to write, since we're pretty reasonable at writing apps, blows away any Google Maps client. Just blows it away. Same set of data coming off the server, but the experience you have using it is unbelievable. It's way better than the computer. And just in a completely different league than what they'd put on phones before. And that client is the result of a lot of technology on the client, that client application. So when we show it to them, they're just blown away by how good it is. And you can't do that stuff in a browser.
Nesse momento, o Jobs começa a vê-los como concorrentes. Qual era a grande implicância que o Jobs tinha com a turma do Google? Ele achava que eles eram grandes engenheiros e que, no entanto, eram incapazes de fazer máquinas atraentes ou softwares atraentes. Nesse momento da relação do desenvolvimento do iPhone, o que ele tenta mostrar para o Sergey Brin e para o Larry Page do Google, os fundadores do Google, é justamente isso. Olha, vocês têm essa peça de engenharia fantástica que é o Google Maps, e, no entanto, vocês não conseguem fazer um software para ler esses mapas bem. E ele faz isso. Ele faz um software que usa o sistema do Google e, no entanto, transparece para o leitor de forma muito mais simples. São várias mudanças que acabaram vindo a ser incorporadas depois nos celulares Android e no próprio Google Maps que nós vemos na web. Essa, no fim das contas, é engraçada porque é a penima do Jobs com a maioria dos seus concorrentes. É a penima do Jobs com o Bill Gates, no fim das contas. O software é bom, mas ele é feio, ele é difícil de usar. O lado da engenharia foi muito bem pensado, o lado da interação com o ser humano não foi.
Architecturally, the question is, do you run just in the cloud and all you have down locally is the browser? And that is the same question for the phone as it is for the full screen device. There'll always be different screen sizes because these are, the 5-inch screen does not really compete with the 20-inch screen, does not compete with the big living room screen. Those are things that there'll be some type of computing behind all of those things, all connected to the internet. But the idea that locally you have the responsiveness of immediate interaction without the latency or bandwidth limitations that you get if you try and do it all behind, that's what leads to the right balance.
What does that device look like in 5 years? What would be your principal device? Is there one or?
Is it I think you use, I could be wrong, I think you carry a tablet.
Right.
Right. Which has not necessarily stormed the world yet.
Yeah, this is like Windows 1992, I think. That is, I'm unrepentant on my belief.
What would you think each would be? I assume you carry a tablet PC. I don't know what brand it is. Maybe you change them up. I don't know. You obviously carry a MacBook Pro, I would guess, or what's your device in 5 years that you rely on the most?
I don't think you'll have one device. I think you'll have a full screen device that you can carry around, and you'll do dramatically more reading off of that. I believe in the tablet form factor. I think you'll have voice, I think you'll have ink, you'll have some way of having a hardware keyboard and some settings for that. And then you'll have the device that fits in your pocket, which the whole notion of how much function should you combine in there. You know, there's navigation computers, there's media, there's phone. Technology is letting us put more things in there, but then again, you really want to tune it so people know what they expect. So there's quite a bit of experimentation in that pocket-sized device. But I think those are natural form factors, and that we'll have the evolution of the portable machine and the evolution of the phone will both be extremely high volume, complementary. That is, if you own one, you're more likely to own the other.
And then at home, you'd have a setup that they all plug into?
Well, at home, you'll have your living room, which is your 10-foot experience, and that's connected up to the internet. And there you'll have gaming and entertainment, and there's a lot of experimentation in terms of what content looks like in that world. And then in your den, you'll have something a lot like you have at your desk at work. You know, the view is that every horizontal and vertical surface will have a projector, so you can put information.
So what's your 5-year outlook at the devices you'll carry?
You know, it's interesting. The PC has proved to be very resilient. Because as Bill said earlier, I mean, the death of the PC has been predicted every few years.
And here, when you're saying PC, you mean personal computer in general, not just Windows PCs.
I mean personal computer in general. You can sort of see that there's something starting again. It's not clear exactly what it is, but it will be the PC maybe used a little more tightly coupled with some back-end internet services and some things like that. And of course, PCs are going mobile in an ever greater degree. So I think the PC is going to continue, this general purpose device is going to continue to be with us and morph with us, whether it's a tablet or a notebook or a big curved desktop that you have at your house or whatever it might be. So I think that'll be something that most people have, at least in this society, and others maybe not, but certainly in this one. But then there's an explosion that's starting to happen in these, what you call post-PC devices, right? And you call the iPod one of them. I think there's just a category of devices that aren't as general purpose, they're really more focused on specific functions, whether they're phones or iPods or Zunes or what have you. And I think that category of devices is going to continue to be very innovative, and we're going to see lots of them.
Give me an example of what that would be.
Well, an iPod is a post-PC device. A phone is a post-PC device. We're getting to the point where everything's a computer in a different form factor. So what? Right? So what if it's built with a computer inside it? It doesn't matter. It's what is it? How do you use it? You know, how does the consumer approach it?
E aí a gente começa a caminhar em direção ao que tanto Gates quanto Jobs veem como a era pós-PC, pós-computador pessoal. Ele era único, ele começa a virar o centro dessa vida digital e de repente ele começa a desaparecer. Ele começa a virar mais um aparelho quando toda a informação de fato vai para a nuvem. Não importa qual o aparelho que você tenha na mão, pode ser o tablet, pode ser o seu celular, pode ser um player de MP3, pode ser de repente o seu próprio computador, seja um notebook, seja um computador de mesa, pode ser uma máquina que não seja sua num cybercafé em algum canto do mundo. Não importa. Todas as informações estão sempre acessíveis. Eles, nesse momento, em 2007, estão justamente no meio desse caminho que começa a se completar agora, que é a concretização da era pós-PC.
Outside of the computing area, what are the exciting areas in the internet space at all that you're looking at that you find that's interesting to each of your companies and in general for you? Any kind of social networking, any kind of the wikis, those kind of things we've talked about in the past today, essentially.
You know, we're working on some things that I can't talk about.
Again.
But again, yeah. There's a zillion interesting things going on the internet. The most interesting things to me are these incredible new services that people are bringing up. And
surrounding entertainment or?
There's a lot of them surrounding entertainment, but there's a lot of them that have to do with just sort of figuring out how to navigate through life a little more efficiently. And I think, it's really great when you show somebody something and you don't have to convince them they have a problem that this solves. They know they have a problem. You can show them something, they go, oh my God, I need this.
Microsoft, if I remember correctly, from what I read, do you worry about not being as nimble, both of you? I mean, obviously Microsoft's a much bigger company, but you're a big company. Steve, Apple is. Do you worry about not being as nimble as somebody sitting out there with, you know, the kind of 10 employees that you guys had in 1977?
Well, there's always going to be great new things that come out of other companies, and you want to be in a position to benefit from those, to have those inventions drive demand for Windows and personal computers, and then some of those upstream things you want to participate in. I hope Steve mentioned we are going to participate in search, hopefully to a higher degree in the future.
He did mention that, yeah.
Than at present, so we'll see what we can do there. A lot of the applications are more specialized, so they're not areas we'll go into. You know, take what can happen with education now, that video is mainstream, and all these tools that let you do rich interactions are very mainstream. I'm very excited about that. You know, the idea of empowerment goes back to the very beginning of our industry, and some of those dreams that this would be used by students or that teachers could get better and learn from each other in these new ways. We're just at the threshold where some of those things can happen.
I look at this a little bit differently, which is we're not trying to do a lot of this stuff because it's not what we do. We don't think one company can do everything. So you've got to partner with people that are really good at stuff. Like, we're not, I mean, maybe Microsoft is great at search. We're not trying to be great at search, so we partner with people that are great at search. And we don't know how to do maps on the back end. We know how to do the best maps client in the world, but we don't know how to do the back end. So we partner with people that know how to do the back end. And what we want to do is be that consumer's device and that consumer's experience wrapped around all this information and things we can deliver to them in a wonderful user interface, in a coherent product. And so in some cases, you know, we have to do more work than others. You know, in the case of iTunes, there wasn't a music delivery service that was any good, and we had to do one, so we'll do one.
And what about this multi-touch stuff? It's really interesting. Obviously, Steve showed some of it on the iPhone when he introduced the iPhone. Will this make its way into, maybe you call it direct manipulation of objects with your hands and your fingers? Will this make its way into mainstream, let's say, laptop computers as a new UI or an additional part of the UI, or is that just a
well, but go beyond the laptop.
Specialized devices?
Vision, software is doing vision. And so, you know, imagine a game machine where you just can pick up the bat and swing it, or the tennis racket and swing it.
Yeah, we have one of those.
No, that's
Wii.
not it. You can't pick up your tennis racket
I see what you mean,
and
yeah.
swing it.
Right.
You can't sit there with your friends and do those natural things. That's a 3D positional device. This is video recognition. This is a camera seeing what's going on. And, you know, in a meeting, like you're on a video conference, you don't know who's speaking when they're audio only, things like that. The camera will be ubiquitous. Now, of course, we have to design it in a way that people's expectations about privacy are handled appropriately. But software can do vision, and it can do it very, very inexpensively. And that means this stuff becomes pervasive. You don't just talk about it being in a laptop device. You talk about it being part of the meeting room or the living room or...
Steve? I know you're working on something. It's going to be beautiful. We'll see it soon.
Yeah, you know,
you can't talk about it, but Bill discusses all his secret plans. You don't discuss any of them.
I know, it's not fair, but it's, I think the question is a very simple one, which is, how much of the really revolutionary things people are going to do in the next 5 years are done on the PCs, or how much of it is really focused on the post-PC devices? And there's a real temptation to focus it on the post-PC devices because it's a clean slate, and because there are more focused devices, and because they don't have the, they don't have the legacy of these zillions of apps that have to run in zillions of markets. And so I think there's going to be tremendous revolution in the experiences of the post-PC devices. And the question is how much to do in the PCs. And I'm sure Microsoft is. We're working on some really cool stuff, but some of it has to be tempered a little bit, because you do have, these tens of millions in our case, or hundreds of millions in Bill's case, users that are familiar with something that, they don't want a car with 6 wheels. They like the car with 4 wheels. They don't want to drive with a joystick. They like the steering wheel. And so, you have to, as Bill was saying, in some cases you have to augment what exists there, and in some cases you can replace things. But I think the radical rethinking of things is going to happen in a lot of these post-PC devices.
But what's the greatest misunderstanding between in your relationship and about each other? What would you say would be this idea of catfight, this idea of which one of the many?
We've kept our marriage secret for over a decade now.
Canada, that trip to Canada. Mm-hmm. Was there?
I don't think either of us have anything to complain about in general. And I know that the projects, like the Mac project, was just an incredible thing, a fun thing where we were taking a risk. We did look a lot younger in that video.
We did.
You looked 12 in the first one.
That's how I try and look.
It was 12.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
No, it's been fun to work together. And I actually kind of miss some of the people who aren't around anymore. People come and go in this industry. It's nice when somebody sticks around and have some context of all the things that have worked and not worked. And the industry gets all crazy about some new thing. There's always this paradigm of the company that's successful is going to go away and stuff like that. It's nice to have people who've seen the waves and waves of that, and yet been willing, when it counted, to take the risk to bring in something new.
When Bill and I first met each other and worked together in the early days, generally we were both the youngest guys in the room, right? Individually or together. I'm about 6 months older than he is, but roughly the same age. And now, when we're working at our respective companies, I don't know about you, but I'm the oldest guy in the room most of the time. And that's why I love being here. And so
Happy to oblige. Happy to oblige.
And I think of most things in life as either a Bob Dylan or a Beatles song. But there's that one line in that one Beatles song, you and I have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. And that's clearly true here.